Hi, this is Shauna from the D'Angelo Center Foundation, and I'm here with Stacy Collis, SRO extraordinaire, who we have loved in our schools for years and years. And we're here to talk about some of those school safety issues. Producing this resource as a recording for you to learn. And Stacy's going to talk to us a little bit today about mistakes made and what we can look for and how we can improve and get better to keep everyone safe. Stacy, take it away.
Hey, thanks for having me today. I'm excited to kind of talk to you today and share some information in regards to school safety, but it's not a highly talked about topic of mistakes made, because a lot of times if mistakes happen, they compound themselves, they get worse, and suddenly we're at odds with somebody, whether it be administration to an SRO to parents. All of these things come into play. And so I just wanted to take some time today to talk with you all in regards to some of these things. And I've broken it into five separate groups, that being administration, SROs, teachers, parents, and the students themselves. So I wanted to take some time to talk to you about this. And so as I've broken it down, the first thing is talking about administration. Administration is a group, whether it be a vice principal, assistant principal, whatever the title is, those administrative duties of that school setting. And they are in charge of the school itself, in charge of education, in charge of school safety, all of those type of things. And some things that I've seen that have come from administrators and either said outright or intimated that first off, safety is not their problem. That's the school resource officer. That's campus security. That's those positions. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. School safety is everybody's issue. The teachers, the security, the administration, the parents. It's all about school safety. So we want to get rid of this thought process of it's not my problem. And that's something I've seen from some, not all administrators, but some from time to time that are there. There's also the mentality of we're education, you're law enforcement, school resource officer, and we don't want to blend those things. And again, that's something that has to be blended to make a working, cohesive group that works on school safety, because we all know kids learn more if they feel safe. And so safety is an integral part of that. So we need to be cohesive as we work. There's administrators out there that will treat the SROs, looking at it specifically as their employee. And that's something that can create a lot of headache on both sides, because the SRO reports through their chain of command, that being at a police department, that they have a sergeant, they have a lieutenant, they have a captain, all the way up to the chief. That is their chain of command. They want to work with administration and be that cohesive group with that. But there are some administrators, while we want you to do lunch duty, we want you to do this. They can ask that and you can have that discussion, but there are some that, like, hey, you've got to be there because they feel that you're their employee. And I speak on my behalf because I was an SRO, and I had administrators from time to time that would say, hey, can you be in the commons today at lunch? And that's different than saying you need to be in the commons today at lunch. And so that's what I'm getting at, is they're not the boss, but it can be phrased in such a way. And I would say, yeah, if I'm available, if I don't have something going on, sure, I'll be in the Commons at lunch today. That's a different way of asking that same thing and not acting as my boss, getting me to feel that I have to go there. Um, Another thing that I put down with administration is that sometimes with administrators, there's a reluctance to share information, whether that be a protective nature on their part or they're trying to hold all that information in. Some people will call it siloing, that they've got everything, siloed with one person, and they need to get past that and to really share that information, because that's how we make the schools a safer place. What they share, they might not think is a big issue, but suddenly an SRO or a teacher or somebody on that group might say, oh, yeah, that is of concern, when you look at it this way. So getting past that siloing and just holding on to information. Another thing, and I've got this under most of the categories, and I want to mention this, is ego. It goes for administrators, it goes for SROs, it goes for teachers, parents, all of these things is letting go of the ego. It's not all about you. And when we had committees and different things at our school that we were discussing, behavioral threat assessments, those type of things, it was like, leave your ego at the door, because we want to work as a cohesive group to make sure kids are safe. And if you've got this and I want to push this agenda and do this, that's part of ego. And it's like, okay, that's got to be left. And to say, hey, we're going to listen to all perspectives, not just one, because just one is that siloing of that information. And then that falls on them. And can they make mistakes when a whole group is working at it and trying to solve that? There's less likelihood of mistakes being made because you're covering all the bases. So I'll just touch on it briefly when we get to these others, but ego's a big one, and getting people to understand and those to say, hey, I'm going to leave that at the door. And finally is lack of communication. I'm all about communication. You've got to communicate, and you may not agree, but you still have to communicate and say, hey, my principal, that I had for many, many years, she and I had this, ability to come in together and say, hey, let's sit and talk about this. And I would tell her, I want to know what your perspective is. She would ask me for my perspective, and she would tell me, hey, Stacy, I don't, necessarily understand or agree wholeheartedly, but I do know where you're going with this. And it was just that perspective taking of having that ability to communicate. And some administrators, again, they hold that all in, and we're not going to share this with this group or that group. And we've got to communicate. We've got to share that information. So anything you can think of on administration that, Shauna,
No,
that I haven't,
I think you've done a really amazing job with that one too. So, and I want to make sure everybody knows too, we're not doing this to point fingers that you're the bad
no.
guy, you're the bad guy. But part of our mission in the school and community safety is that supporting a positive culture. So, and positive environment for our students. So, because that is what's best. And so I love the collaboration and how important that is. And I think
Mhm.
people, when they start thinking through, nobody's looking to place the blame. So we want to help you through all of the different parts. And if you can put together that wonderful cohesive team, where everybody, again, may not agree, just like you said, but working through the issue and figuring out what works for school policies at the same time, which may be different than a law enforcement partnership, and the law enforcement policies. And certainly understanding then too, those SROs that are in our school are special people, very special and specially trained people. So everyone can always use more training. So which
Yes.
we know, that's why we're providing
Uh-huh.
this and provide all of our resources for free. But it's so important that people understand this SRO cop is just completely different than the one who's responding to um, crisis or theft or even car theft, it's something like that, or
Yeah.
domestic violence. But the SRO has all of those different skills plus more, and they really have to have the right personality to work with students. So
Uh-huh.
as every parent so who is at a teenager will attest.
Uh-huh. Well,
uh,
and part of what we go when we talk to basic SROs coming into this and going through the training is we talk about carefully selected. Those going into that position, it's a unique position. And I agree with you that I'm not trying to pin anything on anybody. The next one I have on the list is SROs because I know that there are issues that come up. And so this is more of a things to be aware of versus, we're going to say this group makes all these mistakes. No, they just come up from time to time. And if you're aware of them, can they be corrected? Yeah, they can. So when we look at this, I'm all about trying to better myself and looking at this. And does it hurt sometimes if somebody says something to me and I'm like, no, I don't do that. But when it's out there, then it's like, oh yeah, I do. How do I change that? And how do I make myself better so that we can work together in doing that? And my wife would be the first one to say, yeah, there are times it's frustrating because I don't do this or I don't do that. So as I look at these, it's like when these come out in the air to breathe, then we look at it and say, how do we correct this? Because it is happening. And a lot of that relies sometimes on the individual. But others saying that and looking at this and saying, oh, yeah, I have done that. And how can I change that to make it work more, in a format that everybody's working at the same thing? So I'm going to move on to the SROs since I'm there. And the first one I put in there for SROs is ego. We've been in law enforcement. We're trained to handle situations, to come in and mitigate and to do certain things every call we handle. We don't know what it's going to be, and we have to be in a position to get people to do what we want them to do. And is ego a part of that? Absolutely. And so coming in as an SRO, we've got to let a lot of that go. With the ego and saying just because we're law enforcement, just because we're the school resource officer, doesn't make us any more important than anybody else within that system of school safety. So I put that, on the list because I know we've heard that from people. You hear it when you talk to people on law enforcement. Well, they thought they were this, and they acted like this, and they were better than me, type of thing. And I know it exists. And so again, putting that in the air and saying, got to let that go. Um, the next one I had there was trying to do too much or trying to do too little. And they're on each end of the spectrum there. So when trying to do too much, I had the inability to say no. And it was just me. And I overworked myself at times. And then that wasn't helping anybody. Because I wasn't making the best decisions. I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do because I thought I needed to be everything for everybody. And so that's part of doing too much. So you've got to, say, hey, I can't work this basketball game tonight. I've got to be with my family, and I can't do it. I'll get somebody that can work the game. But they want you to do that, and so that communication for an SRO is so important. And the too little. Sitting in an office, not out doing anything, not working with kids. Again, that's part of that proper fit. If you've got somebody that's doing that, maybe they don't need to be in a school. Maybe they need to be back in patrol, because they're not working the way they should be working, too little. And they used to call, well, you're just a kitty cop, or you're doing this, and you just went there to hide because nobody, they don't know how busy it is at times. But there are those that have been in that don't do much. As that part of the process. And then another one I put down there is an SRO getting involved in discipline. That is a school issue, not an SRO's issue. Now, there is a difference if at my school at one time, I don't know if they have it anymore, there was a no hat policy. And I didn't enforce the no hat policy, but could I see a student in a hat and say, hey, would you mind taking off your hat? The school has a policy on that. And if the kid, no, I'm not going to do it, fine. I can still ask. That's not getting involved in school discipline. The school discipline part is, oh, I think they should be suspended for this. And I think, and I'm going to be a part of this whole process. SROs, that's not part of their job. That's the school's, job to do that. And so understanding they've got to avoid that. The SROs as well, having a reluctance to share information on their side, and share that with schools. Now, Colorado is a unique entity in Jefferson County in particular that we openly share information back and forth. But I know there are places out there that doesn't take place. And, as SROs, we need to be able to share some of that information so that schools can effectively work on that. That's where you see some of these programs out there that if a patrol officer runs into a child, out there on a call, it's called Handle with Care, that they then get in contact with the school and say, hey, if you have to, work with this child, you need to be aware. And so we're crossing that barrier of starting to share more and more information to help kids. And that's a program that's out there in several areas of that Handle with Care. Then lack of communication. Again, not sitting down and talking with somebody. I have known SROs that never had a meeting with their principal. That it was only done through the assistant principals, if that, and there wasn't that communication. And so you've got to have that communication. You've got to have that ability to sit down. And I was asked one time, well, what if you had a principal that didn't want to do that? Well, got to know me. I'm going to go in and sit down and say, hey, let's close the door. I need to sit and talk to you. Not in a confrontational way, but we need to have this conversation. I know you're a busy person, but in order to work together, we've got to communicate. And so that would be something I did, but there is sometimes that lack of communication, and also SROs that don't use discretion. as an SRO, we're talked about to say anything you can do to try to avoid a ticket or try to avoid an arrest using discretion, because kids are in that learning process and they're going to make mistakes. Now, there are some serious things that you really don't have many options. There's still discretion, I argue, on that point all the time. The more serious, but there's still discretion in how you handle it. You've still got to get to the same end result. But there are officers, well, this is a ticket, this is a ticket, this is a ticket, this is an arrest, and there's no discretion. Somebody punches somebody. Well, that's disorderly conduct. Well, yes, but can it be handled differently? And so that becomes a problem when somebody comes in and has no discretion on, how to deal with something. I probably drove my bosses crazy because I couldn't tell you before I retired, the last time I wrote a traffic ticket. I had different ways of dealing with those things, with kids that I stopped for various driving issues. Because again, they're learning. Yeah, if it was serious that, or they got into an accident, yeah, something I had to do. But if there was that ability to deal with it differently, call a parent, get them involved, you did that. But it becomes a problem if you have an SRO that comes in and says, this is what happens no matter what. That's not showing good discretion. And so, any other things that you can think of with the SROs?
That was really, really good and so many good points. And, that's something that we've talked about over the years too, doing this is, it's important to be able to make mistakes as a child growing up. And they
Mhm.
have so many factors that we didn't have to deal with when we were growing up, whether it's the online space or, or more kids having phones and more kids having cars. And, I mean,
Yeah.
it's different, and it's different in a larger school. So I appreciate you saying that, because really our schools should be the place that you learn. So, and you can learn the positive lessons and negative lessons at the same time, and the educational lessons. So really appreciate that. So, because I know there is talk in different segments of the community about criminalizing children. So, and
Uh-huh.
sending them through that pipeline where they just get in trouble for the rest of their life. Um, and I think that extra care that you've always shown, when you were an SRO, is just crucial for everybody to think through. And for those of us who do think in a black and white manner, which I think a lot of our police officers and first responders do, it's very black and white. This is wrong. This
Yeah.
is okay.
Yeah.
To figure out how do we get through. It's sort of like the DA's program in Jeffco that we have. So with
Uh-huh.
kids who are using their phone with sexting, and a law that was written really being intended for, adults, but children then participating in it have now committed a felony. So some of the DA's office have had to work with the law enforcement to change that, get a program in place so that
Mhm.
we, don't have students who made a bad decision once, suddenly guilty of a felony.
Well, it's one, not giving out my personal opinion when it comes to sexting, but um, we as a human race have always dealt with various issues when it comes to that issue of inappropriate materials, what have you. But these kids are now dealing with the technology that makes it much simpler to access that on their phones, those type of things. And in my belief, should not be a criminalized issue. Now, there are certain cases where, yes, absolutely, because the child has gotten into an arena or has continually done this, that yeah, you have to make that step to criminalization, but a vast majority you do not. And it can be handled in various other ways through the programs like Jeffco or other entities are doing to try and keep kids on track and say, hey, because we had it growing up with magazines and different things, but not the technology. And I hate to say, I know people or others that would have been in some serious problems had they had the technology that we have today. And it's a part of growing up. Again, that learning process. But it's so much in your face right now with everything, and really no controls over that. So, just my personal opinion on that one.
But
So,
I think it's an important opinion, and it's an important conversation.
yeah.
Because again, these are children that we're
Uh-huh.
talking about. So, and we made mistakes too
Hmm.
growing up.
Hmm.
We absolutely did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were probably fortunate. So with the internet, whatever you put out
Hmm.
there lives forever.
Hmm.
It's hard to get that content off. So, but
Yeah.
recognizing again, we're dealing with
Hmm.
um, someone who is not a fully formed adult. Um,
Hmm.
making decisions that could impact their life in a
Hmm.
really large way. So
Oh
it's a
yeah, and it's not the, it's not the appropriate venue here to talk about that, but I had some wonderful parents that I got involved with these, and some comments that came from those parents that, this problem was going to stop. And it didn't come back. It didn't go on, with that. So it is important to talk about that, and to say, hey, it is a part of growing up. But in today's society, it is so, again, in your face. Everything's right there, and it's not the stuff of the you and I growing up that was out there. I mean, this is some nasty stuff that's out there. And so again, it goes to the, hey, what training do we do for kids on the technology? More and more schools are getting into it and starting to look at that. But there's not a lot, around there. So I digress on that one.
that's it's a great topic, and probably more
Yeah.
resources. We have some resources already out there on it on the website, but it's always something that we're creating more on, and we'll have actually another training with Dr. Nicoletti about that one too,
Okay.
the other
Okay.
implications.
Well,
So
great.
good topic, but you want to take us
Yep.
on to the next category?
Yeah. The next category is dealing with, I put down parents, and I'm going to combine these first two. A lack of understanding of the education system, what's going on in the schools, and also a lack of understanding of the SRO, and what that position is. To first, talk about the education system, I will hear parents and have heard parents from time to time, well, it wasn't that way when I was in school, and they don't have the understanding other than maybe coming to a parents' night, or a ball game, or special event, to know and to see what's going on in the schools. There is that complexity of technology and social media and other things that are added in there, to look at it, and a parent to say, hey, yeah, it wasn't like that when I was growing up, but let's take a look at the education system and see what is going on. To come in and spend a day at the school, and just see the interactions, see what's going on, because it is a different environment than what we all went through in the school system, way back when. So there you go. So it's something that parents just need to understand with that. And again, the SRO, they think it's a police officer in the schools, and it's we're there with a rifle, we're looking at this or that, and early on in my career, when I first started as an SRO, I had a mentor, Tony Sanchez out of Fort Collins, that told me, he said, there's a difference between a police officer in the schools and an SRO. And he said, you will find out very quickly what that is. And Tony was exactly correct. When I went in and was involved in this or doing this, it was so different. And what I would tell parents is they don't have that understanding. Well, take time to, when you have that opportunity, talk to your SRO. Find out what they're about and what they're involved in. You're going to see them at games. You're going to see them at dances. You're going to see them at various locations, but find out about that and what they're involved in, because it will help you kind of break down that barrier that sometimes exists. That, well, it's a police officer in the schools, you shouldn't talk to the cops, or you shouldn't do this. And it just breaks down that communication between the groups. And just open yourself up to that and to get that, conversation going to find out whether it be education or SROs. The lack of involvement, there are certain parents that we all know that are involved in everything, and are there for this event or that event, and helping out with various programs at the school. And there are other parents that, because of schedules, because of work, or what have you, aren't as involved. And so what I would like to tell parents, if you're watching this, is take whatever opportunity you can to get involved, depending on what you've got going on. But that will go so far with your kids, that involvement. And so if you have that opportunity, really dig in and just do what you can. We know everybody can't be there the way some parents are there all the time, but do what you can when you can, and be involved that way. Lack of communication, and what I mean by that is they see something in the neighborhood, they see something with their child, and not communicating that with somebody, because they're afraid their child's going to get in trouble, or this is going to happen. I'm all about communication, as you can probably already tell, and I would tell parents all the time, hey, if you come to me and tell me something, it's not automatically going to jump to a ticket. I want to figure out what's going on and what I can do to help. And so whatever we can communicate, because we want to make sure their child's safe, other kids are safe. And if we can do that in advance, we'd much rather do that than have to deal with something after something bad has happened. Again, that communication. And the last thing I had for parents was the gap between their teens or children and them, and trying to bridge that gap with their children. And social media is a big one. Technology is a big one with this. Just as when we were growing up, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have a lot of these communication, but our parents tried to bridge that gap as best they could. Now, there were some that did it well, some that didn't do it so well. The social media is a much bigger gap than the stuff of our day. And so whatever they can do, there are classes out there, things that they can gain perspective, because as we look at these cell phones, for example, most adults have the same addiction that the kids have with the cell phones. And so if they realize that and start to look at it and say, well, maybe this is how I can help, my child. Even on my cell phone, I put a tracker on the amount of time I spend on social media. And if I go over a certain amount, oh, okay, gotta put the phone down and go do something else. And that's something that parents can do and help their kids and say, hey, I've got the same issue. And here's what I'm trying to do. Maybe you try to do this, and help them through that. So, those are some things I had down for parents. Anything you thinking of there?
Well, this is so important. And I'm so glad you brought this one up too. So as a parent myself, and that's how I got involved with all of this, I think it's just wildly important. Nobody, parents' first job, of course, is to advocate for their child, and absolutely they should. We also know from number of studies that the more parents are involved in their child's education, so the better their kids do in school and in
Hmm.
life. So, that support system is just crucial. But I think sometimes too, it is right. We talk about this in some of the other trainings too. It is right and it is the right reaction when you think someone is hurting your child or maybe, your child's friend to get the mama bear, papa bear thing going on.
Hmm.
And you want to stand up and you're coming out, blazing and you're angry. Um, it's very rare that for anybody to be in a circumstance, in fact, I would say it's nearly impossible, where everybody in the school is against you. So that's not a thing. So people
Hmm.
go into education and our SROs go into these jobs because they do care and they want to
Hmm.
protect children. And I absolutely support advocacy. So, and I want parents to participate and be advocates for their schools, for their children. But I
Oh,
want to
yes.
make sure we're doing it. You don't come blazing. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
come in collaboratively so
Hmm.
and try to work on, the problem. We've got another resource from Dr. Nicoletti on the website, about bullying because you've heard bullying, a bullying situation. And sometimes it isn't a true bullying situation. It's kids that maybe got into a disagreement or fighting. Or
Hmm.
sometimes you would hear half of the story from your child rather than the full story about the fight or whatever happened between two students or between a student and their teacher. So, what actually happened, you could get a piece of it, but not all of it. So, I just want to caution parents. I think this brings up your ego piece again at our behavior. So, and even though there's sometimes going to be things that we disagree with or we want schools
Hmm.
to do more, um, there's lots of things that can be improved at absolutely every school. But
Hmm.
collectively within all of these groups you're talking about, it's a give and take. And then there are statutes that come from, the county, the state, the city, and nationally. So where we have to deal with all students
Hmm.
and take care of all students in an
Yeah.
environment. And snow days are a really good example. So many school districts are having to shut down their social media on snow
Hmm.
days when they announce one or delayed start because of the fighting. So going on, and then we have lots of people who in our community who I would be an example to, who no longer has a child in our, K-12 schools. My child has graduated, so I'm a community member, but the number of community members too who don't have a full picture of everything going on in the school. Um, and we're attacking schools and school staff on a really regular basis. And we're doing that online. There's even some national groups that have spread partial information, misinformation, rumors about schools that have led to threats that come from people who don't live in our community to the schools and school staff, which of course is terrifying for the
Yeah.
students and parents who are in the school. Uh,
Yeah.
there's lots of problems with that. And certainly, I think, too, our laws have not caught up with our digital world.
Yes,
So,
yes,
and
they
what
haven't.
people do online and what people say online that actually puts even more students and staff in harm's way.
Yeah, yeah. And it's definitely the time had changed from when I first started in the school and parents would show up to the time that I retired and parents would show up in looking at that, and I would agree wholeheartedly in parents coming in, I hate to say with an open mind, but to say, hey, let's talk about this. Because I'm not going to say my child's a saint, but I'm also going to advocate for them, in that. But let's have a discussion so we can get this all sorted out versus coming in and right away that confrontation happens, and that's not a way to get to a good end result, so to speak. So I'm going to move on here. And then the last major group that I had was the teachers. And, looking at this, this could also include campus security, other positions within that school setting. Um, but again, that lack of understanding of an SRO or law enforcement in general. They have certain opinions or certain things that have come from experiences out there and just don't understand, that SRO function. When I first started as an SRO, I had a teacher that became frustrated at what was done to a student by me in dealing with the situation, and came to me, and I couldn't really say anything about that because we had an investigation going on. And after the fact, that student actually came to that teacher and shared, yes, I did do this. And the teacher came and apologized and said, I, you know, I just, this was my student, and I was frustrated, and I gave them credit for doing that, to come back. But it's that lack of understanding of saying, hey, we're all part of this puzzle. And if one piece is missing, it's not going to come together for a beautiful picture. My wife and I are into puzzles right now, so you'll hear the puzzle analogies and doing that. We're doing one on Vincent van Gogh right now, which is very tough. So, but it's that lack of understanding, the lack of communication, of saying, "Hey, I'm seeing this in the hallway, or I'm seeing this from this student in a classroom," and not sharing that information. Not, even if it's not just to an SRO, maybe it's not to administration or it's not to anybody. I don't, and it kind of goes with another one, being a confidant to the students to an extreme. Well, I don't want to get the student in trouble. Again, they silo that information, and well, I know this student, and the student wouldn't do that, even though they said this comment or did this. They're not the type of kid that would do that. That's that siloing of information, and saying I'm not going to share that with anybody. And we've had those situations that have come out after the fact, and we're dealing with a student, and the teacher says, oh yeah, I saw them do this in class, or they said that. Well, the question was, well, why didn't you come forward and tell somebody? Well, I didn't think they'd do that. And again, it's that communication. Um, the ego is another one that comes into this. It's with all four of those groups, that ego of, I'm the teacher. I know these students. I have them, this many minutes throughout the day. They're part of my group in this, or, I coach them at this time. And so that ego comes into play. And so dropping that, and teachers are like, the last one I had for them is saying safety is not our problem. Our problem is to educate students. That's what we do as teachers. And my dad taught for 40 years in a small school district in Illinois. And he and I had this conversation, and he goes, he had taught for 40 years, coached for 40 years, did all this stuff within the education system. That's kind of how I got to where I was doing this as an SRO, because it was a perfect blend. Growing up with two teachers and, having all that. But he goes, safety was always our concern. It was always my concern as a teacher, he told me, because that was part of the kids feeling safe and being educated. And his job was to make sure they didn't put themselves in predicaments that were unsafe. And he said it was always part of that issue. Well, there are some teachers, and not all. And I'm talking, very small percentages, but say, well, that's not my issue. I'm here to educate. Well, safety is part of that, that education system and teaching, because we want kids to grow into productive, self-sufficient adults. So those are some things I had for teachers. Anything you can think of there?
No, I think you really covered it. And really every teacher we had, all the way through, 12 years of school plus 10 administrators. Um, I know that those people loved my child and cared about my child. And it was almost like a co-parenting situation, you know what I mean? So I mean, there's the
Yeah.
school secretary, so who or one of the aides, so who would, text me when my daughter wasn't having a good day, and she's been, kind of crying here in the, in elementary school. And it really is that collaboration. And if you go into it with
Mhm.
that mindset that it's a collaboration, teachers aren't looking to take over your children. So
Mhm.
they have enough to do. Um,
Yeah.
but when you're around a child, especially starting in elementary, and you have them all day, every day, and the parents get the evenings and weekends, right? It really
Uh-huh.
is that collaborative, almost a co-parenting kind of situation. And seeing those people through that eyes, or through
Uh-huh.
those eyes and through that lens, really can help. Because I have seen, every once in a while, again, very small percentages, you might have somebody who's apathetic. So, in a job, whether it's law enforcement or education or any other job that we work in,
Yeah.
who's apathetic and doesn't care that much. But the vast majority, so don't take a job with such little pay, um, because they do it because they care. So they
Yeah.
really do care about their kids. So that cultural piece and that cultural information, um, positive environment is so crucial to every school building. So I think you talk about that with the ego again too, coming at things knowing that people may come to work with you through a different lens of your child than you may have. So,
Yeah.
and putting your ego to the side, because you're going to learn some things, especially in those teen years, about your child. So, that you didn't expect. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's natural, and that's kids seeking their independence.
Mhm.
And that's, behavioral health professionals will talk about some of that too.
Yeah.
Um, but everybody sees each other through a different lens. So if we
Mhm.
come about it in a partnership way, and you can always go up the chain. So if you find somebody who's apathetic and doesn't want to help you, there really is a chain of command and support. And if you build the school culture like you're talking about as well, where the educator and the parent and the administrator and the child and the SRO are all really collaborating, you put so many protections around every child in that school, if everybody does their part.
Yeah. And what I've told parents in the past is, as I was once told, is your parents always love you. They just don't like some things you do from time to time and the choices that you make. But they're always going to love you. And that's the baseline of everything. And you could apply it to an SRO, to administrator, to a teacher as well. I had those students that loved those kids. But there were times I didn't like what they did, and they made some bad choices, but that love was still there. And that was so important to get across and say, hey, yeah, it's going to be terrible for a while because I didn't like what you did, but I still love you. And let's work through this to get to where we need to go, to move forward on that. Um, so looking at those, that's what I had for teachers. And the final group, I really didn't have any mistakes. When we talk about mistakes in general, it's the students that are there. The reason I didn't have any mistakes is mistakes are how kids learn. We don't want them making mistakes 10, 12, 15 times. And, that's a choice. It's not a mistake at that point in time. But our job, the administration, the SROs, the teachers, the parents, campus security, is to create an environment that kids can make mistakes. They can, have those things. We want them to be safe, make good choices, and try to keep them as protected as we can to where they can make a mistake and it is not detrimental to that student. And so that's the job of all the adults that are there, because kids are going to make mistakes. And we want, and I said it before, we want them to be productive adults, to be self-sufficient, to be caring, to be all those things as they go through. And these times when they're in the education system and they're working through the schools, they're doing stuff. They're going to try you. They're going to have these things. And if they run into that wall, that this is the way it is. Let's say it's an SRO. Well, you're getting a ticket for this, and and that creates an even bigger wall, because the child saying, "Well, I don't like cops now." I've had students that have told me, I don't like cops. Well, you've not met me. And you've just given me a challenge, because they've had bad experiences. And that's part of this process. And so with the students, that's how they learn, is to make mistakes and say stuff sometimes that gets you angry, or to do that and to be able to take a step back and go, oh, okay, they're doing that. Maybe I don't deal with them right now, and I come back at it a different way, deal with them later, or that type of thing. So those are the things that I had down on my
Um,
list.
Yep. That's another one of those quotes from a movie that I love. Sometimes it takes a lot of wrong answers to get to the right one.
Mhm.
We all learn at different paces, and
Yep.
respecting people as humans, for their humanity,
Mhm.
coming from a place of care, and love. So even when you want to pull your hair out and you're very upset with what someone has done. So,
Yeah.
I think it's all of those pieces of it. So in that
Uh-huh.
positive culture, that's why I love working with you so much. When we do these recordings and resources for
Mhm.
people to see things from a different perspective, and try to see things from the perspective of another person that you have to collaborate with, so to raise that child. I mean, there's none of us who
Yeah.
are raising this child on our own. So
Mhm.
even if you were homeschooling, you've got a pediatrician, so, or
Mhm.
different doctors we deal with from time to time, coaches, arts teachers, if you did extracurricular, you're going to have lots of different
Mm.
people come in and out of your life. So making sure that you build that culture for your own child, is just crucial. But again,
Yeah.
it's okay to make mistakes.
Hmm.
Sometimes it takes a lot of wrong answers to get to the right one.
Yeah, it does. It does. And kids, that's what invigorated me, going into the school system, working in the schools. Every day was different. There were great days. There were days that kids made some rather bad choices that you had to deal with or to work through. But it's all about that learning process. And it frustrates me from time to time when people will talk about, well, let's take the SROs out of the schools. We don't need that because, again, their mentality is it's a police officer in the schools. And with today's society and it being at the speed it is and the access at the kids' fingertips to make bad choices and they kind of blow up with that bad choice because they're not sure how to deal with it. And so they say something online that is taken out of context because we all know, it's just the written material that's online. And we've got a whole another issue that has to be dealt with. And in my estimation, the SRO is just as integral as all of those other things within the school system and the school community as a whole, because once that SRO, they have ties to the community around, the businesses, the neighbors, the other people within that school community, and it's a puzzle. It's a huge puzzle that if one piece is missing, it goes a different direction.
Yep. Well, Stacy, thank you again. So let me get out my pom poms again. Thank you for everything. So really appreciate you taking the time to
Uh-huh.
share your knowledge and wisdom so that we can all think through how we all do our parts to get better. So, I mean, that's a big part of school safety, and, just working together. So, and figuring out how to work together, especially when we're all coming from different perspectives, view things through different lenses. This is exactly the kind of resource that we love to create so that everyone can stop and think, how do we get better? So, because ultimately, for every single one of us, every single one of those groups, we want to take care of those kids in our school.
Mhm.
So, and we want to set them up for a really healthy, productive life where they know that they're valued, cared for, and have lots of people to turn back to for supports, no matter how long it's been. It's really important.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the big thing. I can't tell you how many times I've had former students that still reach out to me, have my number and hey, what's going on? In fact, I was so excited last year. One of my former students attended a basic SRO class and reached out to me and asked if I was going to be teaching it. And unfortunately, I wasn't. But she went through that SRO class and was so excited to tell me that she was going to be an SRO in the school system where she currently lived. And I'm like, there's nothing better than having
yeah.
that come back and being told that. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit and have this chat today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for another resource. And everyone out there in Team DeAngelis, we'll see you again soon. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Have a good one.